Hi, Steve Patterson here. I've been stammering for the last couple of days to say something about this whole everything going on in the world, and I wanted to wait for a couple of reasons because it's watching it develop, and I wanted to put it in terms that I work in. And so what I figured I was going to talk about here real fast is how we can look at this whole event around the coronavirus and use a recovery model from my years of working in drugs and alcohol as a counselor, and as then prior to that a recovery coach. And there's a very large hawk flying right over there. And sort of put this in that scenario because I've been talking a lot on Facebook about how we can use this time to sort of take a quasi holiday, and I don't mean that this is good in any way, and for anybody that's being impacted directly in whatever way, your work or actually being sick or have a loved one lost or just people being lost in general, nothing like that. That's sort of set aside for a second. If we just look at any situation has a little bit of good in it, there's going to be some good points. Like for instance today, out in California, LA and San Francisco and all those places are not having people commute. Just think of a week of that and just the air quality around town. I mean, yes, that's an environmental thing and you might not be into that, but it's real and you breathe it, and it actually happens that way. Less cars equals less stuff in the air, right? That's a positive. Overall though, the reason you're doing it, not so positive. But that's the case with every choice you make. It's going to be, there's rarely an absolute yes or an absolute no, because everything's going to have a component of all that, And so even in the choices that you make that end up not going well, or an event happens that you happen to be part of that's not like the way you want it, there's still some good in there. And even if there's absolutely not, at least you can get some learning out of it, So then you become the value in that. You put more value in your life because you're learning and you're growing. And that's what I think we can use this time to do. Just like, put it in the context of the 5 steps of change, 5 stages of change, as they refer to it in the ASAM, the American the medicine people for the United States that do the DSM-5. They call it the 5 stages of change. And so they've got pre-contemplation, contemplation, and then planning, and then action, and then recovery. That's how somebody goes through the getting rid of drugs and alcohol situation. And so in pre-contemplation, what we have is last week, or maybe last month, when we didn't have any reason to change anything. We were fine. Life was good. Everything's fine. We were living life, and meanwhile, in another part of the world, this was going on, right? And we were sort of happy-go-lucky. Think of that like the person that maybe doesn't realize that their drugs or alcohol are getting out from under them, that it's no more about them having a good time, it's about them having to do the drugs to have a good time. And that dynamic changes, the difference between people that can go to the game and have a few beers and then show up and go to work every day or whatever, as opposed to the one that goes and has beers and then doesn't show up and goes to work every day or whatever, DUI, things of that nature. Not everybody that gets a DUI, of course, is that. But the chances of that happening are greatly increased. So you typically see people with DUIs that have a drinking problem, as they say, and then there's always talk about that. We won't talk about that though. So that's pre-contemplation. The person that's doing that and happy-go-lucky, maybe they're killing their liver, maybe they're getting high blood pressure, maybe they're slowly pushing away their wife, and they're not even aware of it. So that's pre-contemplation. Then something happens. Like with myself, you suddenly get a diagnosis of liver failure. And a component of that could be the fact that you're drinking, and there had been some drug use in your past, and at the time there still was to some degree, and so but nothing, the typical blah blah blah, nothing, no heroin or anything like that. So, but that was my moment to go from pre-contemplation because I had never even thought about it. I was doing the thing, man. I was a journalist. I was working for Yahoo Sports. I had this huge community of people on this message board. UGAsports.com was the name of it, and the Dog Vent was one of the most famous college message boards out there as far as sheer volume of people, like 250,000 registered users, and we'd had that since the late '90s, and it's still in existence today. I sold it in 2014, but. And that's why, when I went into that contemplation phase, when they told me, you got 6 months to live, then I said, I don't buy your myth of death, and I didn't. I was like, I've got to figure this out. And I've, of course, not had a drink since that day, but I didn't really think of it as, I looked at it as life wasn't working, not any one thing. It caught me by so much surprise, I was just devastated. I was like, what the hell? Similar to like right now. all of a sudden, what the hell? We're at home. We're supposed to, I'm at work. I work at home already. I'm an online counselor, and I've been that for a long time. But I'm wearing my home clothes today. I'm not that I get dressed up anyway, but to show that, I'm at home. And so if you're at home now and the government's going to send you some money and they're taking care of everything, and just assume all that's happening, right? Assume that's happening. You do your work you can do from home. If you're a teacher, you do your teaching. If you have to go to work, you go to work. There's going to be a lot of that. This whole essential person question. And the essential person right now is you. Because even though the structure of this whole thing might have you in your home, and we understand how we got that term, the fact of the matter is now you're at home, and the system has said go home, and everything's cool. You have a note from the doctor, and the parents are okay with it. So what are you going to do? And I talked a lot about this in a blog post, and I'll link that below. I talk a lot more about that. But within that's contemplation. What are you going to do? You're looking at your life. And in this case, for drugs and alcohol, of course, they're seeing how it affects various parts of their lives. But in this case, with the structure of what's going on in society right now, what you maybe reassess is, hey, I'm at home, I did my thing, I did my job, I did whatever it is that sustains me. If you don't call it your job, you do like I do, and you call it your calling. I do my calling from home, and it's on the phone too. It's convenient like that. But, if you take the time to do the thing, to do the work, then you've got this whole blank space of time of nothing to do, right? Nothing to do. Now, of course, there's going to be the immediate rush to do the things that you'd like to do normally that now you can do more of. But if this goes on, even for 14 days like they're doing in some places, it'll probably go a little longer than that overall. It's going to get, the way things are going, I'm just going to assume it gets a little bit more of that. And we're going to be at home for maybe a month, more or less, or maybe longer. Who knows? Regardless of how much time it is. When you get past the phase of doing your thing, you get past the phase of doing that other thing that you like to do so much that you only have a little bit of time for each day when you get home or whatever, and now you've got all day, maybe it becomes old. Start looking back, just like we do in drug and alcohol. What were the things that were going really well last time you had all these options and time before alcohol or cocaine or oxys or whatever it is came into it? What were the things? Because those are the things now you're saying have to be there. If they're not there, what were the things that were there before? Because, you at one point in your life, you weren't doing that and things were all right, and then suddenly you did. So the reason that happened, one thing, but what were those things? And most people don't know. Because for most people, a lot of people, I will say, I'm sorry if I'm doing too many generalizations. I'm just sort of telling my story. I'm not trying to be too all-encompassing here, saying everybody's doing these things. But we can use it to consider the overall message here of how we can change. And so within that, on the drug and alcohol community, you're trying to find out what those things were. Well, now you can do the same thing. What were the things that you did prior to, say, in this case, the addiction being drugs and alcohol, in this case, addicted to the story of your life? You've been supporting this thing since you were 18. You had those 18 years to get trained up on how to be a good person, know your morals, know your ridiculous amount of information that you're never going to use again because it makes you a well-rounded citizen. And you've been a citizen since. In the machine. You might love it. You might love your job. You might hate it. But you do it. And that's the system. And that's fine. We don't want to break the system. We have to support each other. We have to have roads. We have to have government. We're going to have cops. I mean, maybe one day, but that's not today. So in the meantime, let's think of what those things you used to do. Or maybe that time, like I say in the article that I wrote, the blog post, all those years you said I'm going to do a garden might be just a good time now, because if you're home for 2 months, I mean, you might even be able to get something out of this relatively soon. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to have to live off your garden. I'm just saying, wouldn't that be nice? And so if we did that during our sort of contemplation time, contemplate what were the things that we used to do that we liked. Playing, as I referred to it yesterday in the blog, and I won't go into all that. If you want more on that, just read that, please. And so during this time, find those other things that come with your creativity that you had when you were younger, when you didn't need the thing, whatever the thing is. Today the thing is your job, your career, your story, that part. But that you sort of grew into, were molded into, and stuck in and stayed. And I'm not trying to say that everybody's life's miserable. People are plenty happy doing that. And some of them are eager to jump right back into it exactly as it was. But overall, as society and as a planet. See, that's the thing. We're a planet now. Every single person across the earth, well, I mean, you know what I mean. 99% of the people are aware of this. We've never had this ever in the history of documented history, probably even before, where they were all maybe before when they weren't thinking of anything, but that would be the mutual connection. But in this case, so many people are worried about the same thing that we have an opportunity here to really start looking at each other as people. And I know other people have been talking about this too. There's some videos, and I've seen some motivational guys get out there, rah, rah, we're going to do it, and I'm not that kind of guy. But the thing is, just because we talk about it, and I've been writing about it for days myself, we got to do that. We have an opportunity here as a species to look at each other as people. You know, it's not Iranians have coronavirus, it's not Russians, and we don't need people calling it the Chinese virus, sorry. But, you know, why don't we just call it the virus and the people? Because that's what it is. These are people getting sick. Those people that you call those other titles, yeah, we know all that, but they're people. This is the first time we've had that, where all of us are facing a very real and present danger as it is perceived. And I'm not trying to be conspiracy here. I'm just saying that we're all thinking about it at the same time. And we're thinking about how it could touch us personally, like right now. All of us. And some of us are. Some of them are getting sick. Some of them are dying. It's serious in that regard. Whether or not you buy into the fear, you get carried away, whether or not you think it's a conspiracy and this is all being a sort of shuffle of the top of the world order or whatever you think, who cares? Either, in all those scenarios, the whole planet's still thinking about the same thing. So that leaves it on us as individuals to, during this contemplation time, start to think of those things. And then when we move into the next stage, which is the planning stage, now we're doing that. Now we're making our garden. Now we're maybe playing guitar again a little bit more. And maybe if we do this more, we get more and more into these other things. We remember that we like doing these other things. And I'm not saying that you're going to somehow bypass this spiritual bypass here or playful bypass. You're going to be making good use of your time and investing in yourself and bringing yourself back out. You know, we talk about going back to your inner child and all that. Right. Do that. And it doesn't mean he's a little kid. It means it's full of life, full of I could do it, full of I'm good enough, full of... Kids don't have bad hair days. They don't need the approval like that. You know, I said yesterday, when's the last time you had a bad hair day at home? You don't. You have them when you're out. You don't think about it till you're leaving the house. Probably have no idea what your hair even looks like. Maybe you do. Maybe you're very vain in that way, and I'm sorry if that hurts. I mean, that's fine. Maybe you could use that as self-care. I love myself. Look how beautiful I am. And that's great. That's fine. And, you know, so I guess the vanity part, scratch that. But maybe there is. So if that applies, keep that. But so anyway, that we could be doing during this planning time and then do those. That's the action phase. So now we're out there doing it. So we decided, wow, we like to do gardening, and we went to the store, and now we're doing the thing, right? We're doing that thing. We're still doing our other thing. If we have to go to work, if we're a first responder, teacher, well, teachers are at home largely. Do that. Do your classroom. Everybody make sure your kids are on their classrooms, whatever all that is. We don't need to bust the system all the way up. Keep doing those things, and I'm not saying overall bust anything up in the first place. I want us all to be together. It's the opposite of busting us up. And so during this time of doing that, get used to it. You know, we went out and I saw, you know, of course everybody knows about the toilet paper apocalypse and all this, right? Well, I also saw another one that's interesting of people that are going out and buying like cases of wild turkey and all this stuff and stocking up on their beer. And to me, I say to that, good, do that. Do that at home. Do that at home. And do those other things too. Don't just drink it and yell at the TV. Don't just drink it and watch the same old movie over and over. You know, you can watch your Netflix, but maybe don't binge watch all 19 seasons in 3 days, you know, or whatever. But get out and do those things. And if you want to do those and take your beer with you, if you decide you want to try to, I don't know, paint, and you go off in the woods, take it, whatever. My point being that the value here would be that if you're going to, this is a harm reduction type of model. If you're going to do it anyway, why not cut down on the overall impact? And what that overall impact would be, maybe you get used to, again, barbecuing at home or doing whatever you do at home and having that there. And then when this is over, you just simply don't go out to the bars anymore. And I'm sorry, bar owners, there's going to be some adjustments for everybody here. And my brother owns a sports bar in Chicago. And he's probably watching this right now saying, Steve, I'm going to call you. But But that's just life, man. That's life. This is how life goes, and we can't change that part of it. We can't change anything. All you can do is be in your own personal power and change you. You can't force anybody to do anything. Force is negative. So now you're doing it, right? And so in addiction, when they're the doing it phase, we often run into, I say often, I think the system says often, you get programs out there that label you an alcoholic and you have to be that forever. And so you're constantly reminding yourself of the worst self you've ever been in your own mind. And so eventually it's on your mind all the time. You stay in that addiction and you relapse. Now that's not every relapse, but that's the long-term one. The one that just keeps coming back in. They're just never getting that figured out because they are not agreeing with themselves and deciding to change. That's the only way it happens. I don't care how fantastic your counselor is or whatever. What they would do in that fantastic state would be to somehow cultivate within you your asking of that question, and then you knowing the right answer, and that question ultimately being something along the lines is this supporting me, and am I willing to keep destroying myself? And that can go on for a long time. But that's what happens when people finally stop. In my instance, it was, you have 6 months to live, and there's all these things that are doing it, and all of those things stopped. All of them. I even left my career. That's when I left the journalism thing. I still had it, but I let my staff run it for basically the last 3 years. I was very sick at the time. I wasn't really with it because of the impact it had on my mind and the buildup of the toxins. So there was a couple of years there that were kind of hazy. It was rough. I was supposed to be dying in 6 months, but I lived. Obviously, I'm here now. But so during that recovery phase, we have that relapse. And so in this, the relapse would be basically the ability to not do that in the first place, to not do those other things, to get that creativity, to figure out what it is you want to do other than that normal thing, which is to sit down and watch Netflix. And I love Netflix too. I'm always looking for another series, and I'll watch it, maybe an episode a night. Sometimes I'll get crazy and watch like 3, but then I won't watch any for a month or 2. And then it might be like 3 in 5 weeks. Who knows? It's, again, I do that self-moderation, much like a lot of people when they do their drinking. I'm not going to become addicted to my TV set. And so I lost my overall. The relapse and the addiction thing, for the individual that doesn't do that, what they're doing is relapsing back into that old model of a month ago. In other words, if we went back to a month ago when we were in pre-contemplation, or 2 months ago, whatever it was before we started hearing about the coronavirus, should have been 6 months ago. But anyway, so the story goes, now I'm buying into the story. Not that I'm discounting it, I'm just saying there's so many things being said. If we could go back to that day, would we? Because how many of us really would say our life is happy all the way? I know a lot of us would, but I also know a lot of us wouldn't. And so if you're sitting at home distancing and doing the what's the other one called, the shelter in place, if you're being in your shelter in place, use this time accordingly to get to something new and not just dream about the past. You get stuck in the past, the story. If it wasn't a good story, why do you keep telling it? Right now, start writing those chapters, start making those notes, and doing those things during that action phase of the 5 stages of change. You're in 4th stage now. Do those things, and then when we get through this, and we will get through this, and there will be people that die, and we all know this. We all know the reality of the overall story and what's going on, regardless of the myriad of conspiracy theories and just misinformation from media, all that. Regardless of that, we will eventually get through this one way or another. But then what do? That we're in recovery sort of then. So what did we do now? Are we going to be like the person that went to recovery and stayed there for a month? They had their 5 days of detox, and then they went there for a month. They're probably given something like Suboxone or something like that to take home and to take that and wean themselves off if they're addicted to certain types of things, if there's an actual physical addiction going on. And they do the thing there, or maybe they hit all their meetings and they show up every week at their meeting, and but then 6 months later, which would be the equivalent of going back to pre-contemplation, because what this person didn't do was ask that question. That person was unable to, like in the scenario of being at home, go out and figure out those things, find that creativity. The person that doesn't do that would be much like the person that goes to a recovery center for a month, gets out, because he did the time, or she did the time and did the thing, and she's probably thinking, she's going to be okay. But they never really found that other thing, what's really causing this. Because with drug and alcohol work, they mostly look at the effects of things. They see the problem and they blame the alcohol, so they stop the alcohol, but they don't behind that. So what happens is they stop the alcohol for a certain amount of time. Whether it might be alcohol next, or it might be become abusive, they might become any number of things, because whatever that thing that was starting it in the first place is still there. And that's the trap they get trapped in with these, I'm not going to say it, with long-term struggles. Let's put it like that. That's the trap that they're stuck in, that loop of their own story. And they never were able to ask themselves the question in a way, to answer it in a way so that both the question and the answer are asked by the same person. And when that moment of agreement happens, boom, they don't drink again, or they don't do that thing again. Because somewhere in there, whatever they figured out, whatever that long lost back thing was that they flipped over, the equivalent of finding that thing right now that you used to do that was creative, in these two scenarios that I'm sort of talking about here, the people and the ones that go into the recovery center and do that for a month, like this woman that I know who I talked to earlier today who's done that, she came out, and after a long number of years of this, many years of this, and going through systems, and then so she comes out of this thing, and we've been working together, and so now, and I'm not trying to take credit for anything, don't get me wrong, she did all the work, I just happened to be there. You know, it turned into a thing where suddenly wife was beautiful, so maybe I sort of helped beautify it a little bit by maybe illustrating some of the options and ways that we look about positive and negative energies and the attractors that make you be drawn to them. She was able to ask the question that made it so that she felt full again and felt happy and self-confident about her decision to stop. And then when she got out, those negative attractors just weren't there, and she saw the positive attractors. They were there, and everything's, you know, wonderful in the world. And at first it was like, okay, this is, you know, who knows? And this is not me saying this. This is the other people, you know, sort of quasi-doubting her and, frankly, myself. But now here she is, a year out, and you talk about people that are woke. She's not like that. She doesn't have a, well, she does have a WAF shirt, just because I told her what woke is. But she's not like what your typical woke person mannerisms as far as dress and interests and things like that. Very free spirit, very self-confident, very woke. Her consciousness level has risen from just me and just my problem and my lousy story and why I can't, when she went to I can do and went from that negative space of doubt into the positive space of confidence and courage, when she did that, and then followed up with a year of continuing to do that, you know, I'm not going to make any predictions, but just like they say people go back to drinking, and yeah, they might, I would be surprised very much to see this woman go back. Her life is so good right now. And she would tell you that on and on and on. So she would be like the person right now that uses this time to do your things. Do all your things. Take care of your kids. Walk the dog. Do your thing. Social distancing with other people's dogs, of course. And then do your other things, the things that you like to do. And if it gets to a point where it just sounds boring and it's slow and you feel sequestered to your couch or whatever it is, if you get there, and I'm not saying you all are, I hope you don't, but if you do, if you are and you're watching still, try to find that thing. What was that thing you liked doing when you were 16? Or when you were, you know, think back to the childhood memories of what were good. What are your favorite childhood memories? And then ask yourself, what was going on around that? Well, I could still do some of that. And you know what? That inner child in you would still enjoy it the same way. Because that part of you had never changed, that you showed up on earth, that little spark of the divine, or whatever you want to call it, that created the consciousness within the physicality that is your body. And all this resides in the physical matter of your mind, and its memories, and your intellect, and the consciousness that connects those two, that allows that to happen. They call it the hard question of consciousness. Why? Why does the mind-body, that's called the hard question of consciousness. Why does the mind-body experience happen in the first place? We don't know that. We don't know that yet. There might be some esoteric explanations for it, and I know that there are, as far as creation. But scientifically, it's not known. Right now, perhaps data science will get there, the new emerging math after quantum, and largely going beyond quantum. So I get sidetracked there. The people that are able to find that right now are going to be the people like this woman that I just mentioned. They're going to be able to come out of this thing, treat it sort of like an addiction to the old story. They're going to be free of it. They're going to be able to do those things, have the time to do it, have the time to cultivate that joy again. And then when it's over, try to keep doing as many of those things as you can. You don't have to just all of a sudden, playtime's over, go back. No. If you're able to, if this goes on for 6 or 8 weeks and you're able to do a lot of this stuff from home, keep doing that. And I'm not saying this to try to shut down businesses. I think all of us across the board should do this. If we really want to change as a planet, as a species, we've got to do these kinds of things. We talk about waiting for the shift, waiting for the thing is going to happen, space aliens or whatever it's going to be. Who cares? I'll dig it. I dig all those stories, But right now what we do have is all of us thinking at the same time. If a lot of us could do these types of things that I'm saying here, I believe that we could have some beginnings of those kinds of shifts that we're talking about. This is our opportunity for that. All of this, it's happening talk that we hear in spirituality and in the community that I have on Facebook, that I don't even know what you call our strata of people, but we hear it's happening a lot. Well, it is happening. This is it. It's been happening for a couple, month or whatever, but it's now happening in this way. It's got us all, the collective consciousness of the human species is more or less, for the first time in its existence, paying attention to the same thing at the same time on a very personal level. And all the other people are doing the same thing. Not nationalities. Not Republicans, not white supremacists. Well, they might still be that, but stop that too. That's in you, not outside. Not these other labels, is my point. And even that's a label, the white supremacist one. And, that's a whole different topic. That's an addiction to a story too, but that's the same kind of thing. Maybe they can spend this time to see that their neighbor across the street, who maybe happens to be one of these other people, and now, since they're over there and social distancing's okay, we've been here for 14 days, now maybe we're, oh my God, talking. Shocker. We need to see people as people. And this is a good time for us to get back to know ourselves, so that when we re-engage the system, we can make it a little more, a kinder, gentler nation, I think is what Bush, when I was in the Army, maybe said that way back. But, let's do that. Let's make it a kinder, gentler planet. See if we can't come out of this with a better knowing of who we are, what we like to do, what we need to do, and in doing that, how it can help all of us. I be me, you be you, we hear people say. Let's do that. But you have to find out who you are now. Consider some of these things I said. Even if you're already totally fine, we can always do things better. Not that we're not good enough, but if you can't say we can do it better, that's a limitation you're putting on your own potential, and it's in there. So that's all I got. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to put this on Facebook. I wish everybody the happy hunting for yourself. Thank you. Oh, windindraven.com is my website. Like and share. All those things. That's how Google, it can tell who gets the most action, I guess is how you'd phrase it, the search. And I do this for a living. I work with individuals in drug and alcohol in the state of Georgia because of the licensing. And then also, but I do recovery, which is heavily drug and alcohol if it needs to be, but it's not counseling like an addiction counseling. But recovery is not under the same limitations as licensing, and I am I'm a trainer of recovery coaches, in addition to a number of other recovery labels that I wear. But then I have a humongous interest in the esoteric and consciousness itself, and that's similar to the way I'm talking now is how our sessions go. So if you're interested, or anything like that, I know there's a lot of counselors that are scrambling to get online. I've been online. I think Zoom's pretty overloaded right now. Might have to do something like FaceTime. So if you're not in the state of Georgia or you don't need actual HIPAA compliant drug and alcohol, we could even do it on the phone like FaceTime. We can do it any way we want. It's up to us at that point because we're just people. And it's just my work, my calling, and it's your interest. And it's all about you. Obviously, without you, I wouldn't have anything to do. But then without me or you, we wouldn't have any reason to be doing any of this. We have to all be here together. So, go play.